In the long memory of mankind, where empires rise like dawn and fall like weary stars, no name resounds as loudly as Rome. A city born of myth, raised by iron, and crowned in the spoils of continents. Even the greatest of all empires, the one whose shadow stretched from the cold forests of Britannia to the burning sands of Syria, could not outrun its fate. But before we walk into the ruins, before we sift through the ashes of an empire that once ruled the world, in our last video, we uncovered the hidden story behind Rome's rise. The brutal conquests, political manipulation, and calculated violence that transformed a small city-state into the most powerful empire the ancient world had ever known. If you haven't seen that story yet, it provides crucial context for what comes next, because the same forces that built Rome would eventually destroy it. Before we begin, take a moment to support this channel. These stories, the ones history tried to bury, only survive because of viewers who choose to keep them alive. If you find yourself drawn to the darker truths behind ancient empires and forgotten civilizations, clicking the like button helps more people uncover them. And if you want to continue exploring the real history most textbooks avoid, consider subscribing. What follows is not the story Rome wanted remembered, but it is the one that explains how the greatest empire on earth truly fell. At its height, Rome ruled more than 70 million souls, spanning 3 continents, from misty Britain in the north to burning Egyptian sands in the south, from the Atlantic's restless waters in the west to the fertile banks of the Euphrates in the east. But with every mile Rome gained, a new burden followed. What began as a powerful, compact republic had transformed into a sprawling, unwieldy giant. And like all giants, its legs strained beneath the weight. The frontiers grew dangerously long. The armies stretched thinner and thinner. Barbarian tribes pressed against the borders, testing Rome's strength with every season. Just to defend its borders, Rome needed nearly 50 legions, hundreds of thousands of men who demanded payment, land, food, and constant supplies. Rome had become too vast to govern effectively, too expensive to sustain, and too complicated to control. The empire was not yet dying, but its breathing had begun to labor, and trouble was only just beginning. Every empire reflects the character of its rulers. But Rome, after Augustus, became a stage upon which both greatness and madness performed in equal measure. One need only remember the emperors whose names echo through history: Tiberius, withdrawn and paranoid; Caligula, whose cruelty became legend; Nero, who watched Rome burn and blamed the innocent; Commodus, who fancied himself a gladiator rather than a ruler; Caracalla, who murdered his own brother and drenched the palace in blood. But beyond the madness lay something more dangerous: instability. For nearly 2 centuries, Rome's greatest enemy was not an external foe, but its own emperors. Between the years 180 and 285 AD, Rome suffered through what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In little more than one lifetime, the empire saw over 26 emperors, most of whom died violently, endless rebellions, generals fighting generals, provinces breaking away, cities sacked, and the treasury drained dry. It was an age where a man could go to sleep serving one emperor and wake up under another. The Roman throne became a prize awarded by assassination. An ancient historian wrote, "Soldiers made emperors, and soldiers killed emperors." Rome had become a revolving door of power, its leadership corrupted by ambition and fueled by fear. The empire's foundations trembled because the heart that once beat strong had become weak, uncertain, and divided. Rome had always been a military machine, but machines require fuel, and Rome's fuel was war. The empire constantly fought. Germanic tribes on the northern borders, Parthians and later Persians in the east, rebel provinces in the west, pirates in the Mediterranean, raiders in Africa. But while earlier wars had fed Rome with gold and slaves, the later wars only consumed. They drained the treasury. They cost countless lives. They demanded resources Rome could no longer easily spare. Worst of all, Rome no longer conquered. It merely defended. There was no profit in defense, only loss. Take, for example, the disastrous Battle of Edessa in 260 AD, when Emperor Valerian marched east to face the Persians. In a twist that shocked the ancient world, Valerian was captured alive, the only Roman emperor ever to suffer such a humiliation. Persian artists carved images of their king using the Roman emperor as a human footstool. Rome tried to pretend the story wasn't true, but the truth was written in stone. The empire that once crushed kings now watched its own emperors fall like common soldiers. This was not just defeat, it was a sign. Rome's sword arm was growing weaker. Gold, silver, taxes, trade. These were the veins through which Rome's lifeblood flowed. But as wars multiplied and threats grew, Rome faced a brutal reality. It was running out of money. Treasuries were emptied. Coins were melted down, mixed with cheap metals and reminted until Roman money became nearly worthless. Inflation soared. Prices doubled, then tripled. Soldiers demanded higher pay, and the government printed more coins, which only worsened the crisis. Entire provinces fell into poverty. Trade slowed, farmers abandoned their lands to escape crushing taxes. The empire was devoured by its own hunger. Rome had become a beast too large to feed, and like any starving creature, it began to consume itself. Rome's rise was built on discipline, the discipline of its soldiers, the discipline of its citizens, the discipline of its senate. But as centuries passed, prosperity softened the Roman spirit. Luxury replaced duty. Greed replaced honor. Comfort replaced sacrifice. The wealthy retreated to private villas while the poor crowded into the cities, relying on free grain from the state. Citizens stopped volunteering for the army, forcing Rome to recruit foreigners to fight in its legions. These barbarian soldiers had no ancestral loyalty to Rome. They fought for gold, not glory. One Roman statesman warned, "We rely on those who may one day turn their swords against us." Prophetic words, for that day would come. Rome's character had decayed. The empire that once forged disciplined warriors now raised generations who wanted entertainment, not duty. The rot was not visible at first, but it grew, quietly, relentlessly. The world beyond Rome was not static. Tribes shifted, nations migrated, climates changed. And in the late 300s, a terrifying force entered Europe, the Huns. Fierce warriors on horseback, they swept across the plains like a storm, pushing other tribes before them. Goths, Vandals, Alans, Suebi, all fleeing westward toward one place that still offered protection: Rome. But Rome could barely protect itself. In 376 AD, desperate Gothic tribes approached the Danube River, begging the Romans for sanctuary. Rome allowed them entry and then exploited them, starving them, abusing them, stealing from them. Hunger turned to anger, anger turned to rebellion. In 378 AD, the Goths met the Roman army near Adrianople. What followed was one of the empire's greatest disasters. The Roman army was annihilated. Emperor Valens was killed on the battlefield. The Gothic horsemen rode through Roman lines as if they were paper. Rome was no longer the dominant force. It had become prey, and its predators were growing bold. By the 5th century, Rome itself was no longer the empire's capital. The emperors hid in Ravenna, a marsh fortress surrounded by swamps, safe but isolated. Imagine it. an empire collapsing while its rulers debate in distant chambers, sheltered behind stagnant waters, disconnected from reality. The emperors of this age were children, puppets, or figureheads controlled by generals, bureaucrats, or ambitious factions. One such emperor, Honorius, famously panicked when told that Rome had perished because he thought they were referring to his favorite chicken named Roma. This was the level of leadership at the empire's end. Rome's rulers were present in title, but absent in duty. A hollow empire cannot stand. For centuries, Rome had seemed untouchable. Barbarians raided its borders, but never the sacred heart of the empire. But in 410 AD, after years of tension, broken promises, and unpaid troops, the Visigoth king Alaric marched on Rome. The city's defenders were weak, its armies elsewhere, its coffers empty. And so, on a quiet August night, Rome's gates opened. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City was sacked. Homes were plundered, treasures stolen, churches desecrated. People who once called themselves rulers of the world now hid in fear, praying for mercy. Saint Jerome, upon hearing the news, wrote, "The city which once conquered the world has itself been conquered." The shock was immense. The symbol of Roman power had fallen, and the world trembled. But this was not the final blow, only the first. After Rome's sack, the empire limped forward, weakened, fractured, bleeding. Vandals seized North Africa, Rome's richest province. The Visigoths carved out their own kingdom in Spain. The Franks rose in Gaul. Britain was abandoned altogether. Rome no longer ruled its empire. It merely watched as piece after piece slipped away. Finally, in 476 AD, a young boy named Romulus Augustulus sat upon the throne, more a symbol than a king. A Germanic general, Odoacer, removed him from power. No great battle, no dramatic final stand, just a quiet, almost sorrowful ending. The Western Roman Empire was finished. The eternal flame had finally gone out. So why did Rome fall? Not because of one cause, but because of many, intertwined like threads of a tragic tapestry. A size too great to sustain emperors unfit to rule endless wars that drained its strength, economic collapse, the decay of civic virtue, the migration of new peoples, the rise of rival powers, and the slow erosion of Roman identity. Rome did not fall in a single moment. It fell slowly, like a tall tree rotting from within, until one final storm brought it crashing down. And yet, Rome never truly vanished. Its laws shape modern justice. Its roads still lie beneath European highways. Its language lives in our speech. Its architecture inspires our cities. Its stories echo in our imagination. Rome fell, but its shadow endured. And perhaps that is the true lesson. Empires fall, cultures fade, power shifts, but ideas survive. So we must ask ourselves if even the greatest empire the world had ever known could collapse. What does that mean for the empires of our own age?